So here I want to further get into some of the basics of Lightroom here. In this video and the ones that come after this, we're going to just kind of discuss about how you might start editing your images and handling your files. So this isn't going to be an overly comprehensive and detailed tutorial on this. This is just so we can make some basic tweaks to this. I'm not looking for you to spend an enormous amount of time right now editing your images. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom. This is the image here I want to edit. For me, it's edit image number 51. I can see at the bottom of Lightroom here that it's telling me the image title of this, the file name is img_991. Okay, so we're going to come back to this, but I just want to highlight right now I have my files on this external hard drive. Again, it's important to know where your files are at, and previous videos talk about how you can know where they're at and how you can move those if you need to do so. So I'm going to double click on this. These files are under photo class, and this particular file is 9991. So just want to highlight that that's where it's at because we're going to come back to that later. Maybe not necessarily in this video, however. Okay, so once I have this image selected, I am going to go to the development module here, and now I can make some basic edits to this. So a couple things to note is we want to convert these to black and white for Photo 2 and Photo 3. For those of you in the advanced class, kind of up to you what you want to do here. We're not going to go through all the color controls on this. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. The other thing is I just want to make a quick small little mental note of the colors in this image here. The main colors I have is going to be purple in this car. There's a little bit of a greenish cyan in some of the headrests within the back of the car, and maybe a little bit of yellow within that black back paneling of that car. So we're going to perhaps use that information here in just a little bit. So if I want to convert this to black and white, I just simply want to click on black and white under basic adjustments here, and it's going to do a good job of converting to black and white. Again, I don't want you using on the left side these canned presets. Instead, I would want you to develop these yourself. So here we just have some basic options. We can change exposure. So of course you're hopefully properly exposing that in the camera, but if you need to make some adjustments, if you've shot in RAW, you have the option to change the exposure, and it does a pretty good job of that because you have more information in that file than you necessarily need. So this image is maybe a tinge underexposed, so I can go ahead and bring up the exposure. I might change the contrast. I want to add a little bit of contrast to this. We have options here for highlights and shadows. These are probably two of the most powerful things, most important things in dealing with Lightroom and RAW files. So if you're missing information in the highlights or the shadows, here's a great way where you can start to recover them in Lightroom. So if you're losing detail in those highlights, you can bring the highlights down a bit, and vice versa with the shadows. Now, this is significantly different than the whites and the blacks. These are more so dealing kind of a little bit more with the white points and black points. You're kind of setting the threshold of where white is in your image. So these are going to be a little bit more extreme. If I start to pull the whites up in the image, you can see it happens much more quickly than if I go ahead and take the highlights and bring them up. They don't work as much in extreme fashion. Keep in mind this is more of a kind of a recovery option. It's much more subtle with the highlights. Here we're trying to recover information in the image, whereas in the whites and blacks we are in essence again affecting the threshold of where the white point or black point is. Also notice that whenever I pull those whites all the way to the right for this image, that I'm getting a significant amount of the image represented in red. By default, it's not going to show this. What I did is I pressed J as in Jerry on the keyboard, and if I press it, all that red goes away, and if I press it again, the red shows up again. Now this is really helpful when you're editing your images, because whenever I'm in this mode, this is showing me all the areas within this image that there is no detail in the highlights. all those highlights that are red have gone completely 100% white. And it's kind of an alarm, an alert saying, you might be over processing this because things have gotten past that threshold of getting detail in those highlights. So I'm going to bring those whites back down. I really don't want to do that there. I want to be mindful of that. I still have that viewing mode with the reds active right now. If I go to the blacks and I take those all the way to the left, notice that I'm getting this representation, this alert alarm of blue in the image. And that's doing the opposite of what happened with the red and the whites. The blue is telling me that these areas in the image have gone completely black and there's no information there. So again, it's telling me, in essence, you're probably over processing this. You want to pull back. Because what we want to have is we want to have a full range of tones from lights to dark within the image. So I need to be really careful with these black and white sliders here, as they can often take the image a little bit too far. For right now, we're going to leave presence alone with changing texture and clarity. You're certainly welcome to play around with these a bit. I often find that many people go a little too far with these. If you do make some adjustments to this, please be rather minimal with them, because they're in essence a different type of algorithm, each one about adding contrast to the image on a certain localized level that gives the appearance of sharpness. And that's how a sharpening technique works. So in essence, these are a kind of sharpening tool within Lightroom. And so please be careful if you decide to play with those a bit. I'm going to leave the tone curve away because that gets a little confusing for many people. The other thing I'm going to look at is this black and white mix. Remember, we talked about earlier about all the different colors within the image. We mainly had purple, we had a little bit of cyan or green, and maybe a little bit of yellow. So what we can do is we can take these color sliders here and we can move them to affect the tone within the black and white image. For instance, we had purple as an option in the image, and if I take those purples and I slide them to the left, it's taking those pixels that already have purple in them, and it's in essence darkening them, and I can move them to the right to lighten those purples. And so maybe I like a little bit of lightening there, can be quite nice. We also had those cyanish green colors. Maybe here we would say it's aqua. I can grab those and move them to the left. And I'm getting a little bit of work here. Maybe I'm grabbing the wrong color. Let me try the greens. And the greens are starting to work a little bit better. Notice it's not having an extreme effect, and that's because there was minimal amount of color there. But here I can bring those greens down, and notice here if I have them all the way to the right, they kind of get a little washed out in those seats area, the head posts. Move them to the left, I get a little bit more depth in the shadows of the trees and the reflections there. So it's something that can be really helpful and powerful in kind of modifying your image in kind of a different fashion by taking colors within the image and then basically changing the tones within those particular colors. Okay, I'm going to end this video from here, and I think we can wrap things up relatively quickly with just one more video after this.